Welcome to the Astrology Star Sisters Talk Over Tea. We're talking about the Scorpio decans with astrology and tarot. And my star sister today is Joy Vernon that's joining me. Thanks for joining me, Joy. How you doing?
I'm great. And how are you?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back.
I
I'm
love
glad
your
you're back.
purple.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to get started here. So, to get a hold of Joy, her website is joyvernon.com and my website is alightpath.com, and we always enjoy hearing from you. So we're going to talk about the Scorpio decans, and here's a picture I took to kind of represent we're going into kind of fall weather. So Scorpio is can be secretive and very much an energy of detective. It's a fixed sign, so it's like stability, security. It's dedicated, immovable, and can be stubborn. Uh, the traditional ruling planet is Mars, and the modern ruler is Pluto. I like to look at both. I haven't given up on both. I like both,
Right,
and
right.
it's a water quality. So water is. Why don't you talk about water? I like what you say about water.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, water is that intuitive, inner, subconscious kind of energy. It's emotional. It represents our relationships, how we connect with others. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing. And the mantra is I transform. And Scorpio is transformative, about regeneration, death, and rebirth, intense, passionate, power, perceptive, resourceful, and mysterious. And the caution is obsessive, compulsive, destructive, and revengeful.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we're talking about the decans today, and it's dividing each sign into 10 degrees of equal proportions. So decan 1 is 0 to 9 degrees and 59 minutes. Decan 2 is 10 degrees to 19 degrees and 59 minutes. And decan 3 is 20 through 29 and 59 minutes. You want to talk about the Scorpio energy with the tarot card?
Sure. So our card for Scorpio is the Death card, and that one's a really good match to the astrological association. I mean, Scorpio is death and rebirth, and we definitely see that in the death card without a doubt. I always like this particular illustration. It is so beautiful with that red cloak, and it's a really positive. It's a positive look for death. It seems welcoming and beckoning in a way. And you see the butterfly for the transformation. Um, and so there's just a really nice quality to this card. Um, and the those trees in the background, they have white bark, and so they might be birches, which represent newness as well. And so, some really nice symbolism that's shown in this card. But that red also brings out that intensity that we see with Scorpio. Um, and this is much more of that gentle transformation than what we might see uh, with some of the with this then I don't know that we might see. This is maybe more gentle than other tarot interpretations, and other tarot interpretations might be more in line with some of the more intense Scorpio interpretations. The red in the cloak definitely brings to mind the ruler of Scorpio, Mars. So that's another nice little touch there. And it brings out that sense of the the energy, the Mars, like Mars can represent vitality. And that's not a word you would associate with death necessarily. Death is a loss of vitality, and, um, and so it really swings it so much towards the vitality of transformation. And we always say death and rebirth, but transformation, I think, can take us in a slightly different direction and allow for that kind of evolution as opposed to just loss and starting anew, which are also relevant without a doubt. But but I think some of the vitality that we see with Mars can lead more to this transformative, evolving type of energy. So I think it's just this is an easy one to talk about because I think it's a really good match.
Yes, I really like this card because it shows, the death and the newness and rebirthing. Because I always think of, um, death, it's like every night we go to sleep, that day has died, and then we wake up to a new day. So that to me is a really good representative of the death and rebirth cycle. And that's not so traumatic as sometimes we'll think of death, of a total ending. So, and I love the butterfly in there and the birch trees because I would agree those are birch trees. And, there's green, perhaps leaves or grass, and then that white flower there. It's like, growing and producing, so I love that representation.
Yeah.
And then we have Scorpio decan number 1, the 5 of Cups, Lord of Loss and Pleasure, Mars ruling the first decan. Do you wanna say anything about this card or the first decan?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this card image, again, Robin Wood tarot deck follows Rider Waite Smith really closely. The art is really gorgeous. And what we see are the 3 spilled cups and the 2 that are upright. We see the cloaked figure. So it's very similar to the Rider-Waite Smith. In the Rider-Waite Smith, there's a castle in the background, and this has a kind of a outcrop, like a stone outcrop, or hill or mountain or something. Um, but it still has similar feeling to it. Um, and I think one of the things that strikes me with this card, um, a- and you can see that the person seems to be on maybe a roadway or a path or something like that. The texture of where they're standing is different than the grassy texture adjacent to them. So I always feel a little bit of a sense of trying to figure out where to go, um, and how to get there uh, when I'm looking at this image. I mean, the title is The Lord of Loss and Pleasure, and the idea of loss, disappointment, believe, is the Crowley Toth title for this card. Um, and those work really nicely with the image that we see. What's lost? A lot of people really like to focus on the fact that there are still 2 full cups, and so you have not lost everything. There's still something to claim, and that fits a lot with our Scorpio interpretation as well. That there is a time for what's lost, and there's a time for moving on to the next thing. Um, I think I think that there's a certain value. This card ends up, you know, the card ends up with a fairly negative feel just as you look at it. It the focus is clearly on the loss and not on any kind of stepping into the new, turning around, moving on, moving away from what's lost. Nothing of that. It seems very in the moment with the loss. And I think that there's something about the death symbolism with the death card, and also just from a little bit of a scorpionic interpretation as well, that sometimes it's really important to recognize when you need to be in the place of loss, in the place of death, or in the place of conclusion. And if you're always looking towards the fresh start, you might miss something. And I think your metaphor of going to sleep at night is really a great one, because the death period is like the sleep that we go through. So the end of the day, we go to bed, and the beginning of the day we wake up, but the sleep part is what's scorpionic. The sleep part is what's transformative and regenerative. It's the sleep part that is so important. And and when we have a difficulty in our lives, that sleep, that death is represented by our fully embracing the experience of loss, fully embracing the experience of pain, fully embracing the challenge and the difficulty that we're going through, so that we can eventually release it, heal it, overcome it, evolve from it.
Well, and I would say that the loss just occurred, so you don't oftentimes have time until you absorb it a little bit to react or move forward. So it's like in the moment, if you lost your job, that can be a huge loss. But oftentimes, when you can reflect back, or a week later or 2 weeks later, you can say that was the best thing that ever happened. But in the moment, it feels like it's the worst thing.
Right, right.
Okay, so we're going to look at Mars, of what Mars is doing. And we're going to have a couple of charts here to show you. So this chart is for October 24th at 10 a.m. in Seattle. And Mars is circled in red there for you to see. And we have a cardinal grand cross with Mars going to Chiron, Pluto, and the Sun and Juno. So when we have a grand cross, we can feel like there's so many things on our plate, or it's like, I need to do this and I need to do that. And like you feel like you want to do them all at once. But, as we know, that's pretty impossible to do all at once. But just choose one and go with that one. But it's also a time of making major adjustments too. Do you have anything to comment on that? The cross?
Yeah, absolutely. That Cardinal Grand Cross has kind of been the theme for all of October. We've had such a number of planets move through that T square between Mars and Pluto, and opposing Chiron. Um, uh, and so really kind of, and the sun is actually finally moved into Scorpio at this point, because we are in the first decan of Scorpio, so it was a little more exact when it was still in Libra. But we had Mercury move through there, we had the moon move through there. The full moon was part of that, uh, um, entered into that grand cross as well. The full moon in Aries was part of that grand cross. So this has been a October theme. And I don't know if you I know you have cardinal placements. I have cardinal placements, and I'll tell you that what you described, so much to do and not being able to do any of it, that is exactly what it feels like. I always think of those squares as being, that friction of, you can't move, you can't make a change, you can't make a difference. Of course, the cardinal wants to get started and wants to do something new and wants to get going. And so when we've got that cardinal cross, it's just like this whole network of forces that are at once inspiring and motivating you, and at the same time blocking you. And inspiring and blocking could both be keywords for Mars. and
Well,
and so So anybody that's been going through that this month, this is a lot of what it is about. It's a really good time, and I don't know if you've also gone through this too, but that Pluto Mars transformation, it's been a really good time to let go of things, to start new things, to really evolve or transform what you want in your life right now and all of that. And I know I've been going through a lot of that this past month. How about you?
Yes, and, I'm a good proponent of writing things down, so, I like to write down the ideas because for me, they've been coming fast even though Mercury's not involved there, but it's been a lot of, that energy of, "Well, I can't do that right now, but that's a good idea to do, next month or 2 months down the road." And to, be as patient with yourself and others as you can. And if you are working on launching something, as much as you can go with the flow because some days it will be probably move fast and other days it might just be conflict after conflict or delay. It could be delays, but it's all going to work out in the end, I think.
Yeah, and I think the fact now, Pluto, of course, finally turned direct, but Chiron has been retrograde. Um, and so it's kind of moving backwards out of that cardinal cross. Although, um, but I think with the Chiron in that, as we've gone through these different activations of the third decans of these cardinal signs, um, I think that there has been a lot of potential for healing. We've got the Mars Pluto transformation energies and some of the Mars motivation energies. And then Chiron's really helped to find the balance and to do some of the healing around that. So it's been a month.
Well, and I agree with you what you said earlier about, you know, releasing things. I think if you've been working on releasing things out of your life that you've outgrown or just don't need anymore, that, this might be a little easier for you. But if you haven't been, it's gonna be kind of like I call it the bell ringing really loud of you need to pay attention and do this. So, for different people, it's all gonna activate in different ways. Okay, we have a
Awesome. Awesome.
grand trine with Mars going to Neptune to the ascendant in this chart. Um, and we'll show you some other charts. And then there's also kites, but that's kind of an energy with that Mars, Neptune, and the ascendant. And this is for Seattle, of course, or the west coast of the United States. This energy is going to be active, but that's a nice energy. Um, with Mars and Neptune, and, then Pluto forms the kite in that direction. And then in the other direction, it's Uranus forms the kite. And in the other direction, Vesta forms the kite. So it's like, and you would call that a grand sextile. So there's this energy that's um, flowing and working with things. So it's like if you just kind of pay attention to your environment and if things are flowing, kind of go with it. And if they're not flowing so hard, just or flowing so easily, just maybe take a step back and say, okay, I need to research this a little bit more. Or I need to maybe, I want to launch this in 2 days. Well, maybe I need 2 weeks and not 2 days. So, do you have
Well,
anything
one of
else
the
to say
things,
about those?
oh yeah, one of the things that I think about with a kite is the grand trine energy frequently has a lot of, particularly a grand trine in water, has a lot of flow to it. I think of it as a water wheel. There's a lot of activity, unlike our the cardinal cross that was going on, that has no flow. This other thing is really flowing. And the kite, to me, the planet that forms the bisextile, and I think of that as kind of grounding the energy of the kite, particularly again with a water trine. The the kite planet will be in an earth sign. And so our three grounding planets, though, in this case are, and grounding in this case can represent giving a channel to the water and giving it a direction to flow. If you think of that water wheel, that the grounding thing is what that wheel is turning. You know, the outside wheel is turning like a millstone or something inside, and that's where the work is being done. And so what is the work that's being done? We've got Pluto with its transformation, we've got Uranus with its rebellion, and we've got Vesta with its sacrifice. And it's like, whoa, again, a lot of intensity as we're entering into the Scorpio month, without a doubt. Um, so yeah, very, very interesting placements here.
Exactly. So I think we're going to look at the next chart now. And this one is for November 1st, and we're still going to talk about Mars. And the Grand Trine is still active, but oh, and it didn't change because it's supposed to be Mars to Mercury and then Neptune, right? And then I didn't
Yeah,
get
this
that
one is
change
to
in there.
Mercury. The last one had been to the ascendant.
Right. So, yeah, that kind of changes the energy, and there's still, the kite off to Pluto. So that transformative energy and releasing. And this one has a mystical rectangle. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. And I did not include Vesta in this, but Vesta would still be in the same position and still forming that grand sextile. Um but this is for the new moon in Scorpio. And so and I was going for the Mars placements, but I wanted to it was really nice that the new moon is in the first decan of Scorpio, and the ruler of that new moon then is going to be Mars. And so we do have Mercury having moved forward by this date, by November 1st, finally moving forward into that grand trine. It's moving at a pretty good pace now, so that few days difference really let it cross some territory. And so Mercury is going to add in that sense of communication. That new moon is going to give us that freshness, and the moment of the dark moon too just really allow for that sense of loss, that sense of intensity, that sense of very deep inner work as we transform through that lunar cycle. um, and then we also, as you said, we also have that mystic rectangle going on. And so Mercury to Pluto is a sextile. Pluto is trine up to Uranus there in Taurus. And Uranus is sextile over to Mars at the end of Cancer. And then we've got the trine coming back from Mars to Mercury. And so those four blue lines form that rectangle. Um, and that mystic rectangle for me, and I don't know how you tend to look at it. I often try to think of it as a door, and it is a spiritual door that allows us to move through into some kind of new level, into some kind of new opportunity. And I think I mean, because it's sextiles and trines, those are all easygoing aspects. So the rectangle is working with planets in the same gendered signs. In this sense, they would be the feminine signs, and is really letting those things work together for again, I think of it as a doorway, as stepping through into something. Um, and it would be fairly intuitive with the water placements, water and earth. There's still that grounding quality, grounding your dreams, making dreams a reality. There can be that new moon component as well, playing along with this, which gives you the freshness, but also the scorpionic intensity and and the deep inner work that goes along with this. Um, and so again, and we can tie it all back into our card of the 5 of Cups. What are you losing? What are your opportunities? And how can you really deeply let go of what has been lost and deeply connect with that opportunity, that open door that lets you move forward. So, what were you seeing in this?
Well, I always think of the mystical rectangles as a doorway, but as a gift and an opportunity. And like you were saying about releasing something, oftentimes we do have to release or make time for other things to be able to bring in new opportunities and new things in our life. So I really like the mystical rectangle. So, and I agree with what you said about it. So that's why I don't have a whole lot
Yeah,
to say about it because I, very much feel the same way. So,
awesome,
okay.
awesome. Yeah.
So we're going to go to decan number 2, and that's the 6 of Cups, Lord of Pleasure. Sun is the ruling plant, the ruling of the second decan in Scorpio. And that's a
Yeah, and
beautiful
this is
card too.
yeah, absolutely. And this is one of the just the most just the nicest one of the nicest cards. It represents childhood memories, happy childhood. It represents best friends. It represents true love. This is a really nice card, and maybe, some of those things sometimes people try to give it a really kinda nasty turn. They try to emphasize in the Rider-Waite-Smith, there's a guard walking away in the background. They try to, they worry about the children and that the guard has to protect them, that there's something sinister going on. The Some writers in the, uh 2 young people or small people in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. One has, like, this long, um, kinda stocking cap type of hat on, and people say some writers say he's a dwarf, and there's, like, this threat from him. And so you can add if you wanna add as much scorpionic, like, intensity to the card as you can, you are more than welcome to. I don't find that it comes up that way in readings. It usually comes up for me as a sense of generosity, of a sense of gifts, a sense of connection, and easy connection for me, and I think it's the sun, and I think one of the things maybe to try to tie it into Scorpio, I mean, it is the middle decan, it's the fixed decan of a fixed sign, and it's ruled by the sun, which is light, and it brings light into the darkness. It brings light into this fall time of year. Emphasizes the lengthening, even as the days are growing so much shorter. It's really giving us that there's so much more. I think with the sun low in the sky, I don't know how you feel about it. I'm very responsive to light. And I think with the sun low in the sky, it's almost like it's closer. It's almost like it's trying harder to lift me up when I go out in that, because being lower, there's more of a glare than when it's directly overhead, like it is during the summer. And there's so much more of that relief when the sun is out this time of year. um, and I think that that's a lot of what we can see here in this card. And this illustration, similar to the Rider-Waite-Smith, has a sense of stonework, of a wall, of a protective enclosure. And I think again, the fixed decan of a fixed sign gives us security. and then that security is illuminated with this much appreciated sun at this time of year, and we really do get a sense of reprieve from some of the difficulties that are going on.
That's beautiful. I like how you said that, and I like to look at the 6 as, um, youthful innocence, playfulness, because it's a fun card, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so the sun in the sky, and I use the November 1st chart, and, the sun and moon are still conjunct, after that new moon, but it's, almost 12 hours afterwards, and that sun is trine Saturn. That was the only aspect, so, Saturn's about, rules, regulations, containment, restriction, and so, it's like where I mean, it's already in a fixed sign, the sun and moon, and what and Saturn's in Pisces, so the boundaries could be loose, but maybe it's time to kind of relook at what are the boundaries too strict or are they too loose, and what adjustment might be needed. What would you like to say?
Yeah, and the and I guess I'm thinking 2 things, so I need to organize my thoughts. And I had forgotten to mention this to you earlier, but the other thing that we do get with the sun during, its transit, oh, no, it's in when sorry, it's when it goes through the 3rd decan that it opposes Uranus. I don't think either one of us mentioned that when we pulled our charts for the 3rd decan, so, just the inconvenient things that pop up in my mind when I'm trying to talk about something. So so just note for later. But yeah, we've got that sun during this decan, during the 2nd decan, we get that sun trine to Saturn. I do like the fact that you've pulled this, it looks like, for right at the moment of the sun entering that 2nd decan. And so we do have the horns of the new moon. We have that moon should be visible, just a tiny, tiny sliver by the time it's 4 degrees away, I believe. Maybe not. Sh Yeah, I don't do you know what the rules are? Anyway, I don't
It's
know.
about a day later, is 12 hours after, but it'll be soon, so they will
It'll
be able
be
to
pretty
see the
soon.
sliver, yes.
Okay, okay. And, um, y yeah, I think, you know what's interesting? I guess what's most interesting to me, and it's hard to put it together, but Saturn you described Saturn so well. And that but then it's in Pisces, and the sun is in Scorpio, and Scorpio is a fixed sign, and Saturn has all those really fixed, rigid meanings, and then but Pisces is mutable, and it's almost like Saturn is, um giving some leeway to the sun, which it wouldn't normally do. Um, and I think again, a trine, because of the generosity of a trine, because of the ease of a trine, and the kind of, I always think of a trine, I think of passing a football. Like you really need to get that to move a long way, but you've got to have that person to receive it, and there's such a graceful, beautiful arc as it goes through the sky. Perfect talk for for football season has started. And, and so, it just feels like Saturn is just right there ready to catch that ready to receive that football, that energy that the sun, our quarterback in Scorpio, is sending, and to be able to, be quick on its feet, which it isn't usually, and adapt to, oh, I need to get over here, I need to get over here. It's definitely going to receive it. It's definitely going to catch it. And it's got the flexibility which it doesn't normally have. So, and then with the new moon energy, as we move away from tight conjunction, I think is gives a lot of, again, it gives us hope, kind of like our card did. So I like I always think it's so interesting the transits that we look at always reflect the cards so nicely.
Well, and I would make a comment that on this new moon to make sure that you do some kind of new moon ritual, and it can be super simple, write down a few things, but don't be attached to how it comes to being. It feels like
Mm.
it would be possibly kind of easy to manifest. There'll probably still be some work because it's trying Saturn, but Saturn's in Pisces, so just have faith and trust. It's like I would say, don't worry about the how, just worry about what it is that you want to bring in and work on.
Oh, I like that.
Okay, you ready to go on to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the Scorpio decan number 3, the 7 of Cups, Lord of illusory success. Venus is the ruling planet of the third decan of Scorpio. And this is a beautiful card too. Would you like to talk about the card, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, this card, it typically shows that misty, cloudy, um, background with those cups hovering. And there's either, like in the Rider-Waite-Smith, the guy is kind of turned, his back is to the viewer, and his shoulder is such that you can imagine, you can't see, but you can imagine his hand stretched out towards those cups. The other hand is just out to the side. And so in this case, I love how her curly hair just turns into this like cloud of all of these dreams, and she's got her head in her hand. Um, and I think that I mean, one of the things about this card is that the dreams are not all positive, but depending on who is looking at the card, it's not fair. You cannot say these are examples of the bad things in this card and these are the good things, because different people are going to respond to these differently. Somebody might see the dragon and think adventure and be like, oh, what I really need now is adventure. And somebody else might look at the dragon and be fearful of that and say, oh, that looks dangerous. Or they might see the snake and feel it looks dangerous, but somebody else loves snakes. Um, so and there's always that sense here of what do you want. There's a castle, there are jewels, there's a victory wreath, and there's usually often the center cup, or at least one of the cups, that represents something unknown. And in this case, it's a cup with a mask in it. And so just that idea of you know, what are you dreaming of? The card is titled Illusory Success. A lot of people call it pipe dreams, and there is there's a sense that and Crowley titles it debauch because of Venus, and goes a very very awkward way with it. And but sticking to the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, there's this um most people don't find the reality in this card. And I think that's a little bit of the Venus and Scorpio part of it, because Venus is in her detriment in Scorpio. And so she is already very uncomfortable, and she's not getting her access to her usual qualities. Now, at the time of this decan, Venus is still in Sagittarius, I think. She was in the third decan of Scorpio a few weeks ago. But if you think of the Venus and Scorpio part of this, she is lost. She's not in her normal Opposite Scorpio is Taurus, which she rules. She's not in her normal comfort zone. She has to travel a dark path that is much more internal than what she normally likes. She's normally a little bit more outgoing. Um, and so we can get lost in our dreams when we look within. Um, and that is true for most people. But Scorpio is ruled by Mars, and that is a motivating energy. And so Venus here in the third decan is and Venus is a light too. I said that Sun can bring the light to Scorpio, but Venus can as well. And I just did a talk on Venus and Scorpio. I'm trying not to say every single thing I said in the talk, so I'm trying to cut some things out. Uh, Venus as the I believe as the morning star is Lucifer, the fallen angel. That stuff comes up uh, as we look at this. What is her time underground like? Um, and what is her light that she brings to it? Um, the I think that this can be a positive. I think the most positive expression of this card is being willing to, and this is kind of what you said before, not be attached to the outcome when you have these dreams. And I think that's why this idea of that center cup that has the mass, that has something unknown in it, I think that's why that's so powerful. And even the scorpionic idea of the detective or the investigator, um, eh, those things come out here and give us a chance to really explore and research and investigate a dream that we have, a love that we have, a a Venus type of desire. And I think that's the main thing. I had a client this week that was not familiar with tarot, and we ended up with the 7 of Cups, and his response to the we were using the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. He was interested in that deck. I don't normally use it for client work, but he was interested in it due to, it was the one deck he was already familiar with a little bit, so he wanted to go with something more familiar. Um, and that has a draped figure, her arms are out, and she's got a veil over her, and there's, like, this red kind of aura around it, and to me, that's the most desirable thing. It's like, I want to learn that, I want to discover that, I want to unveil that and reveal that, and I think that that is a part of me that has not yet been expressed. I think that's where this card goes, but he's like, "The one thing we don't want," when he looked at it, he's like, "The one thing we don't want is, like, that demon thing in the middle." And
But
I don't I mean, it makes me laugh now, but I always respect what clients say when they're responding to a card, because I think there's a lot of authenticity in that. Um, but I think it's very telling to explore what you respond to in the card, and what looks good to you, what looks dangerous to you.
well, and is it really a demon? Is it something that's in disguise? Like the cup with the jewels, it's like maybe there's just a couple of jewels on the top and there's nothing but rocks below, or
Yes, yes, yeah.
well, thank you. That was a great explanation. The talk that you did on Venus in Scorpio, can people watch that on your YouTube channel, or was that at a organization?
Yeah, no, I am still editing it. It's not up at this date, but it should be up shortly, so if you're watching the replay of this, you probably can find it on my YouTube. And it was about Venus debilitated in the tarot pips. So that should go up um, by the end of the month, hopefully this week.
Oh, great, great, because that would, some people might be interested in that. So that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so Venus in the chart for November 16th. Venus is in Capricorn. Venus is conjunct the midheaven. Venus is in T square with the node, North Node, Vesta, and the South Node. So she's kind of active, and the nodes have been in T squares with Ceres for quite some time, and now that's kind of moved out of um, orb, so to speak, and now Venus is there. So this T square with the nodes has been going on for a while. It's just a little bit change of energy. But Venus is about female energy and our possessions and our desires, where Ceres is about you know um, needs and grief and all that. So there's a little bit of change there. What would you say about this T square?
Well, I think one of the things about and this I the reason I missed September was, well, it's because I was sick, but I was sick because I came because I came back from Colorado and caught COVID on my way back. But I was at a astrology mini conference put on by Astrology University, and we talked about planets. One of the presenters, several, I think more than one, talked about planets square the nodes. But the thing, and of course, everybody said so many brilliant things, and I wish I could remember all of it. Luckily, there's recordings, so I can go back and listen again. But the one thing that I remember the most is, I believe Mark Jones said it, that that any planet that's square the nodes interrupts, because that nodal axis is an axis of moving away from and towards. And so a planet that squares that interrupts the flow of what we're moving away from and what we're moving towards. And it brings in, because of the square again, that inability to move forward, that stuckness, that kind of being at odds, or even just that friction of I can't move. That planet that's square to those nodes is bringing that friction to where you're coming from and where you're trying to get to. And this is interesting with the Venus on the midheaven. Um, I do want to look at the other one that I found that had Venus in the seventh house. But before we do that, I think it's worthwhile to notice that Venus is quincunx Mars here, and that's very interesting because the I think when I like I like the word in conjunct, because they're not conjunct. They have nothing similar. Inversion is also another word that works for this, but it's when these things, because Mars is down there in Leo. And so when planets have nothing in common, it's like, how can you? There's no place of commonality for them to resolve anything. And so Venus and Mars, which are such opposites anyway, also are in this aversion to each other. I think that possibly frees Venus up, um, in a way. She's at this point, she's no I mean, she's not only not in Scorpio anymore, she's already moved all the way through Sagittarius and finally gotten into Capricorn. Um, but I think it frees her up a little bit, and um, well,
I,
I don't know. Does that make
I
sense?
Yeah, I
I'm
would
starting to
agree with that.
ramble.
And when we have planets square the nodes. They call that in the bendings or skip steps. So, that's area that you have to work on to kind of regroup. And then Venus is also sextile to Juno about relationships. So maybe relationships from your past and in the future. There's some work to do, perhaps with yourself, with how you do relationships with others, to work on to so that you can move to the next steps. So I think
Yeah, I love that.
we
I
can go on
love
to the
that.
next chart. So here is Venus on November 14th, and Venus is at 3 degrees Capricorn in the seventh house, and it's ruling the south node. And that T square is uh, really almost exact. So, or it probably is exact. I mean, it's super close. So, it's in orb for a little bit. So that's really intensifies that. But I know you wanted to talk about Venus in the seventh house. So go ahead.
Yeah, and what struck me when I had pulled this chart, uh, which I did pull for Venus square, the exact chart for the perfection of that aspect. Um, Not only do we have Venus, which is love and relationship, I love the thing that you pointed out with Juno in the previous one, but we have Venus in the seventh house, and this idea of interruption. And there is what it made me think of is when our relationships interrupt our own progress. And it's such an important consideration um, to look at. And it's really easy with this particular chart to blame Venus and the femininity of that, and because that's also a common literary device of how a woman pulls a male hero off track. um, and so I don't it's nice to see it in the seventh house because it can remind us that it's not a case of the feminine pulling us off track, it's a case of relationships pulling us off track. um, and it reminds me too with Joseph Campbell of in the hero's journey of the I think it's called The Meeting with the Goddess. And it is in that which is partly the responsibility why why women get blamed for all the heroes that can't accomplish their goals. Um, it is that idea of coming face to face with this enticing being that can pull you off track. Um, I would say that, and Venus in Scorpio is considered pretty sexy, and so there's a lot of um, kind of that sultriness and sex appeal that we can get there. Um, but I think I think the overall idea of how what are the things, what are the sexy, appealing, maybe relationship-oriented things that lead us off track from moving towards our goal. And because she's ruling the South Node, which is in Libra, um, there's definitely, I mean, the that planet square the nodes often does cause you to want to fall back into the south node energy, which is an easier energy to be in anyway. But on top of that, she's ruling that energy. So it does really draw us backwards. And the Aries energy is such a fighting energy, and it's a place of detriment for Venus as well. And so it's much harder to connect with that. Um,
And
and
Venus
so,
falling back to the south node, that makes a lot of sense because the south node would have been the node that was the most recent conjunction with Venus and that south node. So, you would really tend to do that. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think
Okay.
figuring out the direction and um I mean, did you learn ways of when that planet gets in there and that misstep or whatever it's called, do you have ways of working through that you often help clients with or teach?
Well, I would say to look at, um, past relationships or how they've been, and that there's maybe some kind of adjustment or healing that needs to take place to take that relationship to a higher level. Did you get
Mhm.
stagnant? Are you not having date night, or, it could be simple little things. And so I would say it's been something that's been an issue for a while if I was looking at this, if this was a
Okay,
person's
okay.
chart coming to me. Okay, and then we have another mystical rectangle from Pluto is sextile to Neptune and the North Node, basically, and then trine to Mars and sextile to the South Node and back to Pluto with a trine. So I find it really interesting that that South Node is also involved in this mystical rectangle, um, you know, of the gifts and the opportunities and new doorways opening. So I would kind of say working on relationships. And it doesn't mean that, it's a huge thing that you have to do. It could be just some little simple thing. You make more time for relationships, maybe. Maybe you become a workaholic. And so you don't haven't made time for relationships. And so just scheduling time in your schedule to have relationships. What would you say about the mystical rectangle?
Yeah, and the it's w it's mostly we've got it a little out of sign if we go with Neptune and Pisces, but if we stick to the nodes and Mars, well, and Pluto and Capricorn, but so very soon, Pluto's finally gonna move forward into Aquarius, mid-November, I think. So
Yeah, less than a
very
month, because I
shortly
think
after.
I think it's November 19th or 20th, so about a month.
Okay. Okay, well, but from this chart, because this
Right.
chart's for November 14th, so it's like Pluto's almost there. And so, we can maybe look at this as a fire and air, mystic rectangle and grant Pluto his his, a position in Aquarius and, kind of think about how the air, fuels fire, and so the Libra energy fuels the Aries energy, as the Aquarius will fuel the Leo energy. Um, but that might be something else to add into this is how those past relationships and, as you say, recognizing exactly what went wrong with those really can fuel you towards having a really clear desire and a clear sense of what you want. And that is always, and that's that is our 7 of cups. When you know what you want, when you dream enough to gain clarity, that's when 7 of cups is useful. That you've spent enough time dreaming that you've gained clarity, and can move forward with it. Otherwise, you can just get lost in the fantasies. And so this really outlines that and says, yes, we need that clarity to give us our action steps. And then we're on track with the North Node. I have to say, I do like that it's in Aries because to me, Aries has a lot of independence to it. And so I think that Venus here, uh, in the seventh house, as square to those nodes. Normally, she likes partnership. Maybe in Scorpio, she's not so she doesn't care. She's like, "I have as many partners as I want. I don't need to settle down with anybody. That's what makes me happy." And Aries needs that independence, and maybe that when we really connect with that energy, then we can move forward, um, and find that relationship that gives us our own sense of independence and still supports us with that, as well as, as well as and gives us a chance to support another person in their independence. I think that it doesn't sound maybe to some people like a great relationship, but I think there's a lot of people on this planet that would really value that kind of relationship.
Well, and it might not have even been that anything went wrong in the relationship, but just accepting that the relationship came to its conclusion because maybe each partner learned what they needed to learn, and now it was time to move on. And you might be still holding on to that relationship, and it's time to just release it and let it go. I mean, it doesn't have to be an intense lesson or a great deal of work.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's it's important to remember with the mystic rectangle, it is easier. The square, that part is gonna be more challenging, but once you find that direction and that mystic rectangle kinda opens that door, then yeah, it's a lot easier.
Okay, and we have one more card, the Scorpio court card. Would you like to talk about that, please?
Yeah, and it's a King of Cups. It rules the last decan of Libra and the first two decans of Scorpio. Um, uh, I think this is, I think some of the things that are hard about this card is that I think the King of Cups to me is always going to be representative of a loving partner, and so when we see it, we definitely want to work with that energy foremost. It's water, water is love. And the king of the suit has mastered or is achieving mastery in that quality. And so when we layer the Scorpio energy onto it, it can give us a slightly uncomfortable sense of intensity. Sometimes there can be a little bit more fears with that. King of Cups can be a symbol for alcohol misuse, drug misuse, imbalance with drugs and alcohol, and so it can come up for that too, and so it's really a fine line to navigate, um, and, checking other cards in the spread, seeing, what's coming up, and being able to just talk real openly, with somebody about, do you or your partner have any problems with alcohol or drugs? Is that gonna be a relevant part of this meaning? Or, you know is that anything you wanna talk about, or are we just gonna stick to more of that strictly romantic, interpretation? I think that's a little bit of that Scorpio undercurrent that makes something a little bit uncomfortable.
Well, thank you for that description, and it's a lovely card. Okay, and I have a quote: "Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." And that's by Maya Angelou.
Nice.
So it's been a pleasure to have you here today, Joy. Um, and do you have any other comments that you want to leave people with, or we can just come to our conclusion?
No, that's it.
So come back and enjoy more episodes. Upcoming episodes with myself and Justin is the full moon forecast for Taurus, the astrology forecast for November, and the Chiron asteroid series, Chiron retrograde part 3. And Joy will be back with me next month for the Sagittarius Decans. And I have a dwarf planet series with Sue Minahan, and then Saturn direct and Mercury retrograde with Madame Simon, and the fixed star series, You're a Cup Full of Stars with Marcia Bouchard, and that'll be part 3. And then I will be on Talk Cosmos on October 27th at 1 p.m. talking about the Scorpio new moon. And we briefly talked about that today. So look forward to having you. And you can watch it on my YouTube channel. And Joy and I both have newsletters and YouTube channels, and we both do consultations. So probably the best way to find Joy is her website, joyvernon.com. And the best way to find me is alightpath.com. And we look forward to hearing from you and seeing you on future episodes. So I want to say goodbye for now and see you next time. Thank you.